Have you ever wondered what the future of skyscrapers might be? With population increasing and the global climate crisis on our heels, Vanessa Keith, principal of Studioteka, an award-winning design firm, is trying to solve those issues with architecture. Studioteka approaches designs through a multidisciplinary lens, spanning architecture, technology, economics, social development, and urban environmental concerns. Her book, 2100, A Dystopian Utopia, The City After Climate Change, develops case studies of 14 cities around the world in the year 2100, employing emerging tech and innovative techniques designed to tackle the climate crisis. Futurism at its best, I must say. Join us as we get rebelliously curious. Vanessa, thank you for joining me on Rebelliously Curious. So you are an architect and you're also the principal at Studioteka. Can you tell me a little bit about what Studioteka is and what your mission is?
Well, when I started Studioteka, I was like 3 years out of school and I got my first teaching job in my first project and I just leaped and I totally didn't know what I was doing. But what I did know is that I wanted to create a place that I hadn't been able to find anywhere else. Like I got out of school and I was very idealistic and I wanted to just sort of throw myself into the world of work and find somebody that I really respected and admired who I could work for. And that doesn't mean that I didn't admire my bosses, I did, but I really was looking for a place that had the right combination of, I like to think that architects are practical visionaries. And so we do both. And so Studioteka is a place that really does a lot of cutting edge research and we're interested in new technologies. We're interested in the future. I'm definitely an eco-futurist. And we also do projects where we're looking at the nuts and bolts of architecture and we're solving problems and figuring things out. And we do both. And I get bored easily, so I like to do a lot of different things. And so starting Studioteka really became the vehicle for a lot of different things for me. What I love about my profession is that anything that you're interested in, you can like steer, you know what I mean? You can steer the ship towards that. So I can bring anything that I'm interested in into architecture and into my practice. And that's something that I really love.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So if you had to create this ideal world based in architecture, technology, and design, what would it look like to you?
Well, in terms of an office or in terms of like the world?
It could be both. That's a great question. Let's start with office and then let's move to cities. What that would look like. What's the ideal version for you and why?
In terms of an ideal environment for work, it would be a place where you can have constant learning, where you have people that you interface with who you're constantly learning from. So for example, the consultants that we work with, one of the things that I look for in the people that we work with is that they're open. So, and that also that there's hopefully not such a heavy hierarchy that it prevents new ideas from coming in. I think that that's also something that's really important, is to be open to new ideas, because, an intern who walks through the door might have an amazing idea, but if they don't feel like they can express it, and somebody higher up on the food chain might, needs to realize that they could learn something from the intern, and there needs to be sort of like mutual learning, that everybody has something to contribute. And so, that's really, really important to me. And I look for, I guess, flexibility. And then also humility, because like understanding what you don't know. I never have a problem saying I don't know something. And I'm always curious, like, what did you do? How did you do that? Like, because I think understanding how to learn and how to receive new information and how to research and whatever is, I think, really, really key to who we are. As far as how, like, my vision of cities, I started out, I wrote a couple of articles for a publication called Urban Omnibus, and we were looking at cities and reforesting cities and CO2 and climate change. And I'm Jamaican, Italian, and Chinese, and my family in Jamaica, a big hurricane just hit Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's about the same size as Jamaica, and we are both in the Caribbean and we're islands. And, you know, every time a hurricane is tracking, everyone throughout the Caribbean is following it and worrying and stressing and praying and boarding up their houses. And I mean, this is like a cycle of life. It's kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, when I went to California, I was sort of like, how do you live with this constant fear of earthquakes? And you'd feel like the earth tremoring and everyone there is just kind of walking around. It's not like blasé, but it's like you live with this sort of seasonal threat that something could hit that's catastrophic, that could destroy everything. And that's not a good way to live. So rather than looking at the hurricane tracker for, you know, like right now we're in hurricane season, and just sort of looking at these things forming and where are they going, I decided to do something about it, and I wanted to do research and figure out, are there solutions to this problem? So the Urban Omnibus articles came out, and I was super excited because I was like, yes, here's all this stuff we could do. We could paint the roofs white. And these are things we could do now, like painting the roof white and the streets white is something that's so easy. We could like literally do it now. Why are we not doing that? Why are, you know, so that was a while ago. And so after that, I was like, well, what if we assume that we're not really going to do anything? Like, then what does that look like? Because here's all these ideas, and, you know, we could be doing them. And I think just now they're starting a program where they're painting streets white in LA, which is great. And they're doing a lot over there. But the article and this information was from, you know, we could have been doing this 15 or 20 years ago or more.
Right.
So what if we don't do anything? But what if it's like a dystopian utopia, in the sense that it's, you know, there's nothing to design in a world of just like, you know, zombie apocalypse chaos and everyone's, you know, killing each other. I mean, that's not really a design project that I'm interested in. So it's like, well, what if we go to a 4-degree world, which is not what anyone wants. It's completely not, I mean, I really hope it doesn't happen. My book is totally not about, yay, 4 degrees is amazing. It's like, what it really is about, looking at what it would look like at 4 degrees and the things that we could do, which are all based on existing technology that's either or strategies or techniques that's either in existence now or is being researched and developed now, that could solve this problem. And I've emerged from this as an optimist. I think there's a lot of great stuff out there.
That makes me really happy to hear that, because we do hear a lot about doom and gloom. When we're looking at sustainability, what type of sustainability elements are you using? Are we looking at plants? Are we looking at animals? Are we looking at anything that is obviously environmentally friendly? What are the elements that you're using now that would be, hopefully in the future, will be something that we'll be able to adapt into our buildings?
Well, one of the things that we were looking at is, well, several things. We were looking at waste, right? We were looking at how much, for example, your cell phone has gold in it. There's like tiny gold chips in there, right? So, and there are recycling plants that recycle this tiny particles of gold from all the electronics that we get rid of. And it actually, some of them produce as much gold as a small gold mine. So there's a tremendous amount of value in waste. So we tried to look at different issues with each of the case studies. So one of them looked at that and looked at, you know, the value in what we throw away and how that could be recycled and repurposed. You know, we sort of jokingly looked at the cities in the middle band of the world, right? Which if you draw a line across the bottom of the United States, you're in Canada, great, good for you. You know,
I'm happy about that as climate change happens.
Please let me in.
Yes.
If you draw a line like across, say, the bottom of South America, you know, the continent of Africa. So that area there is all sort of not that great anymore for large scale populations. So what do we do in terms of building materials? I mean, one of the things that was a big strategy in the book that we've continued into our work in VR is we really need to get rid of CO2, and plants do the opposite of what humans do, which is that they produce oxygen and they absorb CO2. So we started looking, even in the Urban Omnibus articles, like we've got like all this surface area, like we sort of like, I really like to quantify things. So we sort of like looked at, you know, if the building's a wrapper, like how much surface area might we have in Manhattan, right? For example, I mean, you've got like the roof, which we're largely not using in many cases. So you have the surface area of the ground, which is covered, but then you've got the roof, but then you've got the walls of the buildings. And if that building's a skyscraper or a taller building, you've got actually a lot of surface area that's not being used. And so we started looking at, could we grow plants there that absorb CO2? Could we generate energy on our buildings, on our infrastructure? Because renewable energy takes a lot of space.
Right.
We also have, for example, habitats for animals, for birds. You know, I remember as a kid, there was I can't even remember, I'm not even going to do an advertisement for this company. It probably still exists, but they had like an ad and it was like, yeah, we're going to come like bird control. We're going to come bird control your house, you know, and we're going to kill those birds that are like nesting in your roof. And I'm thinking to myself, why not build our buildings so that that could happen without destroying the building, and we could actually make it attractive, like here's your home, because we've destroyed so much of their habitats. So maybe our cities could give some of that back.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful as well. You know, why can't we look at working with the environment? And we should be. It should be part of it rather than us just like exclusively owning it. There are, you did talk about areas and different areas around the world. Right now, there's a project called The Line happening in Saudi Arabia, which I find to be fascinating as well. And it's a large, long line across, I forget how long it is technically, but it's massive. And it will be a community that's built within this building that is almost like a glass face building. And it will be really tall and very wide, and it will be in a sustainable community, or even just maybe, I'm imagining it's in Saudi Arabia, so it's obviously going to be a country, but it'll be its own multiple different communities in there, and you can decide where you want to live, and it will be sustainable. What's your thoughts on that right now, and have you heard about it, and where's the development at with that project?
I'm super curious. Like, you know, I love anything that's new and different. So I'm, of course, like any kind of like, you know, futuristic project, or, you know, green city or something like that, like, is always intriguing to me because I love utopias. I do think one of the things that you know, and I don't know that much about the project. I've seen, I guess, like some renderings like everyone else has. I do like the idea of organizing a city around transit so that you don't actually need cars. I think that that's really brilliant. I think that there are some other things in terms of integrating with the landscape and et cetera that, you know, that could be better with the project. But I think at its heart, it has, you know, it's trying to have its heart in the right place. How that will be executed remains to be seen. I don't know yet. But again, like, I feel like we need new things. We've got 8 years before we bake in so much climate change that there's nothing that we can do. And I do think the pandemic taught us that we can pivot really fast. When it happened, I remember saying goodbye to my team, and it was like everybody was, you know, starting to get nervous. I mean, I remember there was a guy in the office who was a little sick, and I gave him a mask, and we were all kind of, you know, we thought that protecting ourselves would be just kind of like giving the side eye to somebody on the train, you know, like, oh, you know, like we're like so naive, right? So we're like, okay, I don't know, we'll let you know like what we're doing, you know. And then it was like it was like everything just clapped down, and we're like, okay, I guess we're not going to the office anymore. How are we going to do this? And now here we are, we're talking on Zoom. Zoom is real, you know. I mean, I have, you know, friendships with people that I've only seen on Zoom. And then when I see them in person, it's like you're seeing an old friend. I mean, this is real, right? And this is how we do this is the world of work and connection. And I thought to myself, how stupid, you know. I started doing, I have a friend from college, and she was doing these kind of like Zoom workouts, and we would like pick something and like do a class together on Zoom. And it was awesome. And we were all over the world. And I thought to myself, why did I think that place was an important, like, was that an important thing for friendship? Why does where your body reside matter in terms of friendship, you know? And so I think this really opened up a lot of thinking about how it could be different. The entire world shifted literally overnight. We pretty much managed to run our businesses from home. You know, I was in New York, and, you know, banging pots and pans and, you know, foghorns or whatever out the windows at 7 o'clock every day with everybody. And there were times when I was just in here. And I mean, I think maybe I left to go take the garbage out, and that was pretty much it. Don't want to go back to that. But I think that we've learned that we can make changes really quickly if we have to. Like, humans are incredibly adaptive and ingenious, and so climate is the next thing, right? Climate is the next challenge. We have 8 years. We really don't want to go even to a 4-degree world. In a 6-degree world, hurricanes can go around the globe so many times, like multiple times. So this last hurricane, I don't even remember the names of them anymore. Anyway, like hurricane most recent would be maybe like many times larger than our monster hurricanes now, and would be so powerful that it would, basically, like, the hurricane belt, which is now the Caribbean, expands to the entire United States and parts of southern Canada, could be hit by hurricanes, right? Hurricanes can hit Scotland. Hurricanes can go around the world multiple times until they lose power by crashing far inland. So you can imagine the trail of destruction that would be, in the wake of something like that. That is not a world we want to live in. But I have hope because I see a lot of people developing and thinking, and the pace of the crisis is faster than we thought, but the pace of development of technology and techniques and tools and people who have, the desire to do something to change this has also happened way faster than we thought.
Yeah. I want to go back to the comment of Zoom and living in your space and being, during the pandemic and using things like Zoom and other social media elements or technology to communicate with people. Meta is in the next, when we get 2100 or 2100, yeah. There we go. When we get to 2100, Meta might be fully ingrained, within around us, maybe technically within us. So what are you using with Meta now in your designs, and where do you see that going in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I really hope that the metaverse is for everyone. I think that whenever it's kind of interesting, like, one of the things that happens whenever you have like a new technology is that people initially use it like the old technology, right? So, I mean, I think if you think like even just materially, right? We develop a new material, it can do stuff, it's stronger, et cetera, but we're still using it like the old material, right? So, cast iron or steel, like you have cast iron buildings, you get steel, but you're still building it and it looks like a cast iron building, or what have you, right? So we have the metaverse and we're still thinking of it maybe like the internet. We're like, oh, it's like the internet, except you put on a headset, and it's kind of like, is that really what it is? I think it's so interesting, like this moment where you have this openness and it could be anything. And that's kind of this like sweet spot that I love before it turns into like, say, just like cat videos or whatever. Hopefully not. But I think there's a tremendous potential for connection, especially in things like social VR. Like, I'm really, really, super, super interested in that because it has the ability to connect us and to have that pervasive third space where I can go and you're always there, and you can go and I'm always there. And, I actually found that things became a lot more efficient for me during the pandemic. Even though I didn't like being stuck at home, I could do so much more because I could be in so many more places than I could if I have to drag my body around with me, right? Which can be exhausting. You think about how much time you spend, just going places, and going places is wonderful. I don't think that the metaverse replaces that at all. But I think what the metaverse does, it creates connection. So, we have somebody that, that's a friend of the project that we've been working with. He's with the Engage platform. His name is Steve Lewis. He's awesome. And he's like takes us on these amazing tours. And, we're in a group, we're in headset, we can see each other's avatars and we'll like pop in and out of different experiences. It's amazing. And we're having a conversation and going somewhere and going somewhere else. And we've done things, for example, there was an experience, I think it was part of the Tribeca Film Festival. Oh my gosh, what was the name of it? it escapes me right now, but I'll remember it later. But we were in this experience, and we also did another one that was called The Morning You Wake at the End of the World, or something like that. I'll find it for you and give you the reference. But it's actually about a time in Hawaii when they thought that they were under imminent nuclear threat and about to be hit, and it turned out to be a false alarm. But it's sort of about what everybody did, like who they loved, how they thought they were going to spend their last minutes with, that kind of thing. And so it's incredibly profound. And we all were in that experience together, because we do VR happy hours, and you should come to one. We have, VR happy hours where we have people, get together and we just do things together. And one of the things we said after this was, it would have been so lonely to be in that experience, which was incredibly profound and moving. But having this group of people that we could experience this with together and hear each other and talk and be immersed in this was so incredibly powerful. So I think that that's really the power of the metaverse, and the ability to really connect, and to connect with people whose bodies are maybe like halfway across the world, that you would think that's not a valid friendship because my body is in New York and your body is in Australia. Doesn't really matter anymore,
I agree with you. Yeah. I think
so
social it will be the new social. Like, I think social in some way does obviously connects us now. Like, we look at Instagram and we look at Twitter and we look at all the different platforms, even TikTok on its own, which I don't use, but that much, but there's so many different ways to connect now, but it's just, we are a cyborg. We're a cyborg. We are holding it in our phone. So we're seeing it in this like 2D kind of version for ourselves. But I think when I look at Meta, I feel like it will be around us and it will be in us. And, for example, Instagram, instead of looking at it, will be the old photograph. It will be now Instagram will be evolved around us within Meta. So I think that it will create more connection, because instead of like looking at somebody on your social, you'll be able to interact with them actually socially and from around the world and create other connection. So I think the metaverse will have those social atmospheres, which we use in social media, but will actually be within and around us.
So let me give you an example. So this was, again, like during the pandemic, and it was New Year's Eve, and a friend of mine was like, hey, like there's a party in Altspace, and there's like a Burning Man group on there who are really awesome. They throw like amazing parties, like, like they do. So they were like having a virtual one, and I was like, all right, like it's the pandemic. I'm not really going to a party anywhere else. So I put on my headset and I was sitting right here, and, and it's funny because it's like, you're like an avatar, right? But you still feel the same way that you do when you walk into a party and you're like, I don't really know anyone, like, do I kind of like hug the wall? And like somebody came up to me, it's like, hi, and was talking to me, and, and then was showing me around, and, we were kind of navigating. And of course, like I'm sort of a klutz in VR. So like I ended up like falling behind something. I'm like, how do I get out of here? I'm like trying to shoot my controller and like get back up to the roof. And everyone was like, yay, let's like jump off the roof into the pool. And there was this pool and people are like floating around in the pool. And it was amazing. And guess what? We celebrated the new year in every time zone. So there were people like, Happy New Year, I'm in Germany. And like, Happy New Year, I'm in New York. And like, so we just kept celebrating every time. There would be like a countdown every time it was somebody else's New Year's. And that was really awesome. And, my headset started to die. So I plugged it in. And then I met some people and they were like, hey, do you want to travel with us? I was like, sure. And so if you're friends, you can sort of pop through different things and just follow people. So, and it's like they have the key. So this one person had like, the key, and we went to all these cool places together with this group of people. And we were talking and laughing and like flying and doing all this stuff. And then I was like, okay, so this is good. So good night. Took off my headset, bed's right over there. Good night, and it was like, that was actually really fun. And, I thanked the friend who told me about that. I was like, this was amazing. Like, how cool. I went to a party, I talked to some people, and I actually connected with some of them afterwards. I was like, some of them are now my friends on social media. And I was like, all right, that was real,
Yeah. And as the climate starts to increase, we will be, in other areas that maybe are more desolate, we will have to find our spaces will be smaller. So we'll have to find ways that we will be able to travel. And because travel might be more expensive then too, who knows? So we do have to find ways that we can connect and travel and work together. With that said, when we get into buildings and cities that are in the future in 2100, my worry is that it will create more of a poverty gap. Is that something that you guys look at culturally? Will it create it? Or are you mindful that there will be places or reusable homes or areas that will take care of people that are unfortunately more unfortunate than people that are able to live and afford to live in these types of communities?
Well, one of the things that was an assumption behind the book was basically that if we have the level of inequality that we have now, basically we are extinct. Like there's just no way, it's not going to work. So we're assuming that if we are around at 4 degrees in 2100, which is it would mean that we would have had to figure out how to work together to survive. And we would have had to figure out how to share the Earth's resources equitably. So we're not looking, it's almost like, how do I describe it? It's kind of like square peg round hole. It's like, here's a doorway and you're trying to carry, the doorway is 3 feet wide and you're trying to carry a just giant iron bar horizontally through, and the bar is like 22 feet long. You're trying to go through the door. It's not going to work. You can't go through the door. You have to drop that iron bar to go through the door, right? So we have to drop the inequality, all of the isms, all of the negativity, and reinvent ourselves as a species in order to move into this new, amazing, for lack of a better word, like renaissance, reflowering, whatever, of humanity on this planet. We are part of the planet. Part of the problem is that we don't see ourselves that way. We see sort of human beings at the apex of this triangle and everything else. Meanwhile, we're sort of stupid to think that we've attained intelligence and all the other creatures on the planet haven't. They're just kind of just going along. That's really the ultimate hubris, right? Like,
Very
we're
much.
so special that we're the only ones. So the other thing that we thought about is like sharing the planet, right? And how we really need to share the planet. And so I think you mentioned something to me about, so we were talking about animals and sharing the planet and that kind of stuff. We have like one of our case studies was actually Johannesburg, South Africa, which is a mega city. And so we're looking at compact megacities are in the parts of the world that are above this middle band, right? So up here and down here. So Vancouver, looking pretty good. Canada, Moscow, pretty good. And so one of the things we thought is we really need vast areas for renewable energy and wilderness. The earth needs to heal. We need wilderness. We need that. So we're imagining cities, smaller settlements like New York would be, and wilderness, right? And those cities have to become more dense if we're going to imagine, okay, so this is not a doomsday scenario. Somehow we managed to survive. We dropped the iron bar, right? We went through the door. We're living in smaller spaces, sharing, for example, common spaces together. What would that look like? And it's got to be denser. So in Wellington, New Zealand, we're looking at what we call a land scraper, which is like above the ground and below the ground, right? So there's technology now where you can bounce sunlight deep into the ground. There was something in New York called the Low Line that was phenomenal. You go in there and it's this dark space and they have sunlight coming from up here and they've got plants growing in a subterranean space.
Wow.
So if we can do that, maybe we can do that in buildings and our buildings can become more dense. And, everyone sort of freaks out at the idea of no more McMansions? And it's like, but is anyone using those formal dining rooms anyway? Like who does that anymore? Who does that? And everybody romanticizes college, right? Like college is so amazing. It's 4 years of your life. Why do you think about those 4 years for the rest of your life? It's like the most idyllic time. You had a tiny dorm room and you had a lot of shared spaces. and you met and re-met and saw people and crossed paths on your way to class, and everybody loves that. So why can't cities be more like college? I have a smaller space and I have lots of shared spaces. In Wellington, we're looking at, the idea that I had was we've got things growing on the facade of the building, and obviously that's for bird habitats and also to absorb CO2 because we need a lot of trees and plants. And then inside the building, we have that, technology with the bounced sunlight. And why can't I have food growing inside my building? Right. So I could be in my apartment and I could look this way and see the gardens inside, and I could look that way and see outside the window and see like the birds nesting in the facade. And then if we do that, we don't have to spread our McMansions across the entire planet and have no wilderness and no habitat for anybody else. And when I say anybody, I mean any other species.
Yeah, and it redefines community. Like I like what you were saying about looking at having food growing in your own building, because again, it's, it could be organic. It's healthier for you. It should be healthier for you, hopefully in the future. And we'd be able to, there's so much more reusing that's going on, and people are actually getting fed, and the waste of food is so much less. But the idea of community is growing. We look at developing nations and we see that they understand community. They do. They work together. They build gardens. They generally share their food. They're living in some of them are living in closer spaces, or they're living in communities that are working together so that they can all survive together as a group. And so I think that when we look at that, and when you look at different countries throughout Africa and anywhere that's a developing nation, personally, I've seen that, where I've been there in Tanzania, and that form of community is so wonderful. And it's something that we don't really have, I feel personally, in North America. So maybe that will be a new way of living, and taking from older models and understanding that this is something that we have to do moving forward to work together.
I do think that again, like the sort of college model or like, residential campus model, you do have a lot of that. You do have a sense of community, and what's great about it is it's walkable, right? It's walkable. You don't need to do a long commute. You don't have sort of the alienation and loneliness that comes from like being just sort of isolated in a suburban bedroom community. And we've also realized with the pandemic, like a lot of people are sort of like, well, gee, what do we do with the central business district of downtown that was just like for offices? Maybe we have live work. Maybe we have other things. Maybe we have urban farming happening in there, or a combination of hybrid spaces. Like, why do we need to separate cities into just this or just that, or, just residential and there's nothing else happening there? I mean, that seems boring to me, and sort of unnecessary. And when I think about suburban life, particularly in North America, a lot of it is, and I've lived in suburbs, and a lot of it is, driving everywhere and separation, into, your house, your yard. Do you really know your neighbors? Maybe you know them if you fight with them, or maybe, people, you probably aren't like super good friends with like the people like right there, but maybe, maybe your kids play with other kids somewhere else in the neighborhood, but it's pretty lonely, and long driving commutes to wherever your work is. So now that people can Zoom work, I think a lot of the, people have realized, hey, you know what, it's nice to actually live and work in the same place. And maybe that's going to reinvent the suburbs too. I mean, maybe the suburbs are going to become a place where there's a lot of different stuff going on besides just bedroom communities where I come home at night, I go to bed, I get up in the morning, and I drive to my job in the city.
Right. Yeah. And I think these development too of different countercultures and subcultures will start to happen within the future when we're living in buildings like this. I wonder if you decide to move into a building that has and offers something more to your alternative lifestyle that you might like. I wonder if we will, and hopefully it doesn't create segregation for us, but humans are very known to create subcultures and countercultures as we go along and we evolve. Have you guys looked at the different types of countercultures and subcultures that are growing right now, and where that might even play a part in development?
Not really, because our scope was so big. I mean, as an architect, saying that your site is the entire world is kind of
Yeah.
crazy, And so I find that because we did that kind of crazy exercise, we get asked to like solve all sorts of like really huge problems. Like, did you think about this? And did you think about how is this going to work? And it's like, oh my God, that's a lot. But in terms of counterculture, or, I'm not saying that everything should be the same. I think that human beings are incredibly diverse, and there's just so much, potential for creativity and exploration in community. So, for example, we were looking at, if you look at, oh my God, my cat is, sorry, my cat, if you hear like a little jingling ball, like he's playing with something behind my back, it's a little distracting. But anyway, please ignore that.
It's okay.
But we have one of our locations is Troll in Antarctica. And so in Troll, we were looking at, and it's these big, it was really interesting thinking about that, because we were like, where are we going to put all the people? If we make it so that the middle band of the world is like pretty much uninhabitable for large cities, then where's everyone going to go? So we're like, okay, so we're going to try to do one in Antarctica. What do we do with this? It's currently a research station that has, I think, maybe 4 people at the polar night, worst time of year, and maybe 30 people at the rest of the year. It's pretty small, but we're like, okay, humans don't generally go to places where there's no other humans. So we're like, okay, so maybe this evolves into something bigger. And as we were looking at this, we were looking at skyscrapers. We're like, okay, so skyscraper. And then we're like, that's not really a good model for density in Antarctica. Do you know why? So it's really interesting. So you've got like the sun, right? And the solar angle, if it's really low, you can imagine when the sun, like if you're on the beach, you've got your beach umbrella and all of a sudden the shadow's way over there and it gets longer and longer and longer. Well, the angles like this, if I have a tower here, the shadow is going to be really long, and you don't want shadows in a place that's very cold because it's going to make it colder. So we're imagining if we were to do like your standard downtown in Antarctica, it would just be, everything would be covering everything else in shadows. So we're like, we developed this sort of idea of like, how can we look at the shadows and can we make this form that kind of is like a ring, so that it has like your building part here, and then in the middle, you can have like different internal environments, right? So it's almost like a space capsule on land. And we tried to organize them so that any kind of melt would be captured in the building, so that we could like take that, because water is going to become incredibly valuable. So anything that melts, we would capture. We would try to have the buildings clustered so that they would protect each other from winds. We oriented the grid of the city like in a sort of zigzag, so that you don't have those wind tunnels. You're in Canada, you know what I'm talking about, like the winter.
Oh yeah.
The wind howling through the buildings in the city grid. That's not a smart idea. So we're like, okay, we're going to do this. And then we had the center oriented to catch the most sun that you possibly can and cast the least amount of shadow on neighboring buildings. And so the idea, thinking about community, is you might come to my neighborhood because we've got a giant lake in the middle of this thing. I might come to yours to go to the apple orchard. We might go to a friend's that one is like the one where there's like all of the sports fields and all of that kind of stuff. The same way that you have different districts in a city now. And all of the sort of nature in that environment, you've got, obviously you can go skiing and you can go outside, but if it's still pretty cold, we're envisioning that those internal environments would become your sort of internalized nature, in the same way that we're imagining in Wellington that you would have sun deep beneath the ground that's like, growing your vegetables for you inside your building.
Wow. And so it would have to be vast. It'd have to be so large. What's the estimated size then of these type of cities, or just even just one building that would hold that? Because if you're holding football fields and orchards, like this is massive. You're looking at the size of small towns or even big cities.
Each of these buildings is like a neighborhood scale. So I think if you look in the book, we literally quantified like how much space we would have per person and how, so I have all of that information. I can't just sort of like pull it off.
No, that's okay. It's okay.
Certainly on like very little sleep, but pretty big. And, and that's because we're looking at people are going to have to migrate. So like, Americans are going to be like, hi, Canada, can we come in? And one of the things we thought is like, how is this migration going to happen peacefully?
Right.
One of the things we thought about was energy trade. So we're like, okay, so maybe the US has vast solar arrays, and we say, okay, we're going to give you, our access to all of our solar energy in exchange for X number of people migrating. And we started to envision how that might happen. Again, to preface, the point is we don't want this, right? So
Exactly.
taking it to its logical extreme, you're like, okay, this is the best case scenario that we could possibly hope for at 4 degrees, and it's not that great. And actually what we're looking at now with the business as usual arc is maybe like 7 or 8 degrees warming, which is even more catastrophic and unimaginable beyond the hurricanes going around the globe. I mean, who knows how many times they go around the globe at that rate? It's just impossible. So the point is really that we have all of these things now, and we should stop it before it gets to 4 degrees.
Yes, that's a really great point. And I read a report from the government. I believe it was 2012 that talked about the climate crisis and what would be happening, and people would be migrating, more north and looking at going to different countries outside of moving into Canada and elsewhere. So I think it's actually a really great point that you brought that up, because we do have to look at having something that's positive and successful rather than creating war, because that potentially could happen. And I think we need to be more mindful of it, because we're seeing that the climate is increasing and we're getting closer to that. So we need to find a solution first, I think, about when it comes into law and legislation, and how do countries work together and migrate people north, and do this in a positive way, because I think that's the first step outside of even just development at this point.
Well, yeah, I mean, we are already seeing climate refugees.
Right.
It's my hope that we can, boy, like it's really my hope that we can do something about this. And I do think one of the things that I feel really encouraged about is I think that there are enough countries that are on the front lines of this, that have the will, the financing, and the political will and the resources to actually really put some serious money into R&D to solve the problem. I think we're getting to that point. I think if we don't do that, what's going to happen politically? I mean, first of all, you're in Canada. We could have sort of superpower Canada and superpower Russia, because those are the places that are going to be, big land masses that are relatively safe, Greenland, places like that. But those places, how are we going to safely, if we have like just crazy amounts of people just migrating everywhere, it could be like really, really difficult. So we don't want to get to the point where the rest of the globe is uninhabitable and people have to move, because there's only so much you can do. Like if there is just a complete tidal wave of people moving, there's nothing that you can do to stop them.
Right. And it's very true. The power of different countries will change based on climate and resources. So I agree. We better start having those conversations now before it's too late. And well, we need to have the conversations about climate change and protecting ourselves there before it's too late. And 8 years is not far away. That's for sure.
But I think actually, if we don't do something, if we don't come to some kind of agreement through the UN or international bodies, et cetera. And it's not only top down. I mean, cities and individuals can actually do a lot. Cities control the vast majority of emissions. So if there's like a thing called, I think it's, what is it, C20 cities or something, I might be misquoting that, but it's a network of cities that have made climate pledges to reduce their emissions. And that does a lot, even if the national government isn't behind it or isn't really doing anything. So that is something. But if we don't do anything, certain countries are probably going to decide unilaterally that they want to do something to save themselves. And some of the things that we can do to save ourselves involve geoengineering, where and that's very experimental and kind of scary, because it's like, well, do we shoot a whole bunch of particles up into the atmosphere that reflect the sun? People are talking about that. Do we do that? And oh my God, if we do that, and we mess it up, are we going to send ourselves into an ice age?
Yeah. What's the cause and effect of that?
Yeah. So, but like if you have people who are going off the cliff, like their country is literally becoming too hot or going under hurricanes or whatever, if they have the money and the resources to shoot some stuff up there to try to save themselves, they're not going to care if it's okay in Canada. They're going to shoot some stuff up into the particle, and just hope for the best.
100%.
I don't know that anyone's really thinking about that, but as we're sitting here arguing about climate change, and it's the UNGA right now, the General Assembly, and people are always talking about climate change, and so heads of state are talking about climate change, and it's very unequal because some people are feeling the effects of it now, and other people are sort of, well, there's nothing we can do. And so North America right now is very much in the, there are people who feel the urgency, but they don't feel the urgency as much as people who are being pummeled every season by hurricanes and living with that, or natural disasters. I mean, I do think we're starting to feel it more with wildfires, things like that.
Right.
Inland hurricanes, stuff we never thought was going to happen. We initially thought we'll just retreat from the coast. So we've got lots of, we'll just go inland. You can't go anywhere because you go inland, you could have flooding like they have in Kentucky. You could have wildfires like they have in, the Pacific Northwest and elsewhere and in Europe. So there really isn't anywhere to run, and your money is not going to insulate you from this. There are people talking about, oh, I'm going to build a doomsday bunker. And then they're having conversations about like, how do I keep my staff here? It's like your staff is like gone. They're going to be like, I got to save my skin, buddy. I'm like, sorry about serving your dinner. Like, I got to go take care of my family. Bye.
Yeah. They're like, I'll see you in Meta. Yeah. I'll see you in the metaverse
Bye.
working. I don't want to work here physically. I don't blame them. Would you?
Well, the other thing about the metaverse that is really great is we can travel and we can go places, and it's not as it doesn't cause as much emissions as a flight. There's a couple of things, like if you think about energy from a perspective of all the sources we could get energy from, right? So everyone knows solar, wind, etc., but there's also piezoelectric, there's kinetic energy, there's energy from just people walking. Your body emits heat. That heat could be like recycled back into the building. I mean, there's so much stuff that we could do to generate energy. And if we tap into that, it's endless. There's endless amounts of wind, there's endless amounts of sun. So maybe we'll get into not a scarcity mindset about climate, but we could be like, hey, you know what? My house is generating so much energy, my building's generating so much energy that I'm going to give some back to the grid. And then we won't have this conversation about you shouldn't drive, you shouldn't be in a plane, because, hey, maybe the plane is running on renewable energy and it doesn't matter anymore. But for the time being, one of the things that I loved, I was always interested in virtual reality and stuff like that, but I got my own headset during the lockdown. So I was like, I'm just stuck in an apartment in New York City, and what am I going to do? And I started doing this amazing game called Supernatural, which I just love. I just like evangelize about this thing because it's just so amazing. And you basically put on the headset and you're in a beautiful 360 video environment of some natural setting. And they literally, you have controllers and a headset, and they can put a triangle and you duck under it, and they fling stuff at you and you hit it with bats. And it's really fun. And every song is a different environment. And so you could put that headset on, and instead of feeling like you're in your four walls, you're like standing on top of a mountain.
It's really great.
That's incredible. And that feels like you're there. And I know that it will only get better. It will only get better and only get more. And so, as we start to really delve into these tools, we won't feel anymore like it's less than in some way. I think you can see a lot that way. And then, as we develop all of these other technologies, then maybe moving our bodies around the planet won't be something that's also part of, adding carbon emissions and all of that kind of thing.
Right. The metaverse is so early too. Like it really is. And we might get to a place where it almost feels like real life, or looks exactly like real life. My last question to you now, Vanessa, is what else are you working on, like currently right now, outside of just the development and futurism? What are you currently working on?
Well, we just won something called the Worlding Workshop, which starts next week. So we are working with Indigenous partners. So we're working with Sachem Hawkstorm, Roberto Mucaro Barrero, and Sarah Yawanawa Bergen. And they are 3 Indigenous leaders from 3 different Indigenous groups. So the Skyscrapers First Nations, which are, it's a group in upstate New York, the Taino in Puerto Rico, and the Yawanawa in Brazil. And so what we're doing with Worlding is we're looking at year 2180 Brazil, and we're looking at different, Sao Paulo and the Yawanawa territory, and we're looking at developing some sort of a really cool quest, an initiation quest or a coming of age quest or something like that, that will reference Indigenous storytelling. And we're working with our Indigenous partners with that. So I'm really, really excited because we've made these amazing environments and we have this amazing story behind 2100, and then we'll connect it with Indigenous futurism and with Indigenous storytelling, and really start to think about how we can rewild the planet, how we can, as Hawke says, re-indigenize, right? So connecting with that part of ourselves which understands how to live on this planet. We have a lot to learn from Indigenous people because they understand how to persist and live and thrive on this planet for thousands of years. And contemporary culture, the dominant worldview does not have that ability. And we're actually going over a cliff right now because of that. So I think that referencing Indigenous culture and learning from Indigenous people is something that's deeply meaningful and important. So that's a project that is coming up that I'm really excited about. And, in my office, we're working on we're always working on architecture projects and really great stuff. So we're doing a really fantastic, medical suite for a really great doctor. And so we're getting into all of the sort of nerding out on all the technical stuff of like procedure rooms and operating rooms and things like that, which I actually really love because I think it's a category of space that needs to be reinvented. I think that wellness and the idea of how your environment impacts your state of mind and your wellness and your mind and your body is something that we haven't thought about too much. So I love doing projects like that where I can work with somebody who really wants to create a beautiful and soothing and supportive environment for patients. We're also doing a really cool apartment that's in Manhattan for a client who has really great taste, and that's going to be super fun because we're doing like Scandinavian rock and roll style. I'm like, I love
wow.
it. Hey, what's that gonna look like? That's really fun. So so again, like I mentioned, like I get bored easily, so like I just love I love interfacing with my clients and really thinking about, what makes them tick and like what is something that like I can use my talent to sort of create this vision. And, it's like I'm like a painter, right? But I don't want to paint the same thing every day. So when people come to me, it's not like you get like a Studioteka thing and it's like, it looks like that. And that's what we do. And you come to us, we just plug you into that like McDonald's franchise. You know what I mean? It looks the same. Every project is different. Every client is different. And what I really like to do is just create environments for them that are supportive of their vision of how they live and who they are. And that's the same thing that we're doing with the book and with VR, just on a different scale, if that makes sense. I really see it all sort of as this like really beautiful continuum. One of the things we're hoping from 2100 VR is that it really becomes a metaverse project, that it's this game that enables you to be immersed and envision this beautiful future, which we know is possible. If I could put you in a headset and you can see it and you can feel it, then we have a sense of, hey, like, and you can build it with me and with my team. You can be in there together with us, co-creating this. Then we know what we want to go towards, and we take off the headset and like, okay, like, let's go build that now. But you have to have a vision of what you want to move towards, and it has to be something good. It can't just be like, right now it's like doom and gloom, and it's like, oh God, who wants to think about that? Nobody wants to think about the future because the future seems incredibly negative when it's not. That's what we have really is a crisis of imagination. We don't have a crisis of tools or techniques or technology or, there's so much great stuff out there and people aren't talking to each other. That's why I want to create something that facilitates that connection. Every conference I've ever been to, environmental people are like environmentalists and futurists, like really like to connect. And like every conference we have these like session at the end of the conference where everyone talks and we make working session and we're going to do this, and all these people get together and they make pledges. And a lot of the time it falls apart because everybody goes off to their individual places and they don't have that third place that they can connect in, you know? So that can be really, really difficult. So if we have this persistent third place where I can go on my phone or on my computer or in my headset and I can find you and I'd be like, hey, I had this idea. What do you think? And we can connect and we can walk around together and talk about it. And then when we take off the headset, we're in our individual places, but we can connect in a consistent, persistent way. We can work towards building that amazing, beautiful future together that we know is possible. And so that's really what I'm hoping to do with this project. And the other thing that I want to do are virtual climate quests where we like go on missions, like, you know, in game together, but maybe my team can also do things in real life. So maybe we can also I'll go to Brazil, you know, and help to build the Yawanawa village together, or do other things, or work with NGOs all over the world that are doing incredible work and support them. So, you know, so it's really like a grand vision and it's my life's work, but I'm an optimist and I really just hope that people can join in on this. I mean, it's a very inclusive process. You know, we love collaborations. We love connecting with people, connecting with new ideas. I'll never get tired of that. And I think like, it's really frustrating for me to see like people kind of like wringing their hands and like, oh, there's nothing we can do. I'm like, throw that all away, because like this is the past. Like this sucks. Like who's this working for? This is like, our world is like pretty, you know, in a lot of ways, like our systems are pretty crappy and outdated. So get rid of that. Dump the garbage. You can't go through the door with the iron bar. Drop the iron bar and make something new. Human beings could be so much more than we are. Just think about all of that creativity, all of that ingenuity. We're such an amazing species. We need to use our powers for good and reinvent ourselves. And I really have a tremendous amount of hope that we will.
100%. Like really, and really well said. And like such an inspiration, honestly. Like we need more people that are positive and doing that type of development. And I thank you for that, because it's nice to see the optimism, because we don't get it as much as we probably should now. Vanessa, thank you so much for spending time with me today on Rebelliously Curious. And I always said, everyone, thank you for being rebelliously curious with me today.
Oh, thank you so much. This was really enjoyable. I hope that I made sense on 4 hours.
Oh yeah, you did fabulous.